Do you think that if you were a Viking, your daily life would be going to sea and ruthlessly capturing new territory? Well, surprisingly, it's not exactly like that. Vikings had homes and families. Whether your name was Bjorn or Gorm, your daily life as a Viking was filled with eating meat, playing chess, and yes, sometimes offering human sacrifices. Hold on to your helmets, because in this video, we will dive into the rough waters and swim through the smooth waves as we explore a day in the life of a Viking. They lived in one big room. Instead of an alarm, your day would start with the sound of roosters and the smell of wood smoke. Typically, Viking homes had just one large room. You would live in that big room with your family. Wait, I forgot to tell you that your goats and sheep would also live in the same room with you. If you were lucky, that one-room home might be divided in two so that you and your family could sleep next to your sheep's hooves rather than underneath them. Just like today, not everyone had equal wealth at that time. Richer Vikings acquired larger houses with more space, which meant that they had larger space for more people, livestock, and food in the house. The largest single room was called Longhorn, which was a hall with a hearth and a cooking pit. No bathroom in the house. When it came to taking care of the bathroom needs, the Vikings had a different approach than what we are used to today. Instead of flushing toilets, they relied on a cesspit, which was essentially a hole dug outside for toilet waste. But despite the lack of modern amenities, the Vikings found ways to maintain their hygiene and cleanliness. They washed up in a wooden bucket or took a dip in a nearby stream. They got around by skiing. Scandinavia experienced very cold winters, cold enough to freeze the ground. So, how did the Vikings engage in hunting or even travel? They simply slid across the ice. In northern bogs, more than 100 preserved pine wood skis have been discovered. Skates made from moose or horse bones were also very common. Additionally, sleds have been discovered in the graves of high-status Viking women. They played a lot of chess. Viking men and women played Hnefatafl in their spare time. It's a Germanic strategy game quite similar to chess. The British Museum currently has a striking ancient Norwegian chess set from the 12th century on display. The pieces were carved from walrus and whale ivory. You can even see the discussion of this game in several Norse sagas. For example, a poem called Saga of King Olaf the Saint highlights a match of Hnefatafl between the King of England, Denmark, and Norway, named Nut the Great and one of his nobles. They played sports. They enjoyed a variety of sports, such as swimming, wrestling, skiing, and ice skating. They also had a passion for archery, and the skillful use of a bow and arrow was highly respected among their people. But the Vikings weren't just limited to sports. They also enjoyed hunting and capturing wild animals. The Vikings also had a unique and dangerous sport, horse fighting. Yes, you heard it right. Horse fighting. It was a ritualistic and symbolic practice that demonstrated the strength and courage of their horses and the skills of their riders. They ate horse and reindeer. The idea of eating a horse might make you uncomfortable, but it was very common for Vikings. No matter their social standing, Vikings consumed a lot of protein and had meat on their tables almost every day. Pigs were raised on farms and estates because everyone loved pork. There were also dishes made with goats, reindeer, elk, and lamb. A stew known as skås was the favorite among the Vikings. Now you might be questioning, did they only eat meat all the time? Unexpectedly, they also included fresh fruits and vegetables in their diets. They loved mead. The Vikings were huge fans of a beverage called mead, which was made by fermenting water, honey, and yeast. Every Viking feast was incomplete without mead. It was so popular that during the Viking era, there was a myth of a goat that produced mead instead of milk. Won't that be great if goats produced beer? You bet! Another drink that Vikings drank very often was Sur, a sour milk beer. They loved telling stories. While eating food, drinking mead, or sitting around the fire, Vikings would tell tales. They even had poets who memorized and read aloud epic tales as entertainment. These poets were known as skalds. But it was not just for entertainment. All generations were educated about Viking culture, history, religion, and legends through the sharing of these tales. Skalds in particular attended royal courts and honored their kings by including them in legendary tales. They had slaves. On their numerous sea raids, they captured unsuspecting individuals and brought them back to the harsh, snowy lands of Scandinavia to be made into slaves known as thralls. Just imagine for a second the trauma people faced being ripped from your home and forced into a life of servitude. The warriors raided these lands as they sailed across Europe from Spain to Byzantium. Numerous iron slave collars have been discovered at archaeological sites, and there is proof that thralls once lived on plantations in Sweden. Have you been enjoying this video? Our YouTube data shows that 0.1% of our viewers aren't subscribed, and we hope you're not a part of that. But if you are, let's have that fixed. Go right ahead and hit that subscribe button and turn on post notifications so you never miss another video. They practiced human sacrifice. There is something weird about how Vikings treated human life. On one hand, they practiced slavery, while on the other hand, they valued human life highly enough to offer it as a sacrifice to their gods. Written sources claim that people were hung from the trees in holy groves. Vikings believed that there was a particularly strong connection with the gods at these holy groves. The accounts of the Christian missionaries tell us that the Vikings offered sacrifices to statues that stood out in natural settings or cult buildings. They had laws. Many people think of Vikings as savages who did not have any rules, but that is not true. There were certain rules that they had to follow, but what's even more surprising is that laws in the Viking era were not recorded. They were just passed verbally from one person to another. But that does not mean that these laws were not taken seriously. In fact, the people who broke the laws were declared outlaws. These outlaws were forced to live in the wild, and anyone was free to go out and kill them. Even though these laws were made by men and women, wives were permitted to divorce their husbands in a relatively straightforward manner. Moreover, women could request the return of their dowry in the event of a divorce. They held massive feasts. Viking feasts were usually hosted by important men, such as a local chief or a powerful king. These were epic celebrations filled with tons of food. In actuality, feasts were a time for visitors, leaders, and subordinates to interact socially and reinforce political roles and alliances. Longhouses, the largest structures on the block, were used to host people in order to showcase the space available and accommodate everyone under one roof. They sacrificed slaves for funerals. You might have seen in some movies that the cremations of Viking warriors appear pretty spectacular. A body would be placed on a vessel, which could be anything from a rowboat to a warship, and then these boats were set on fire. Important possessions, which were called grave goods, like jewelry, their pets, and weapons that they would require in the afterlife also traveled with them. Everything sounds okay so far, but there is a dark side to these cremations. Sadly, slaves were frequently among the grave goods, loaded onto these burning boats. High-status individuals had their slaves killed and sent to the afterlife with them. Even though most men received such cremations, a few high-status women also received this honor. Other than these activities, most Vikings were farmers and they had to do everything by hand. Diseases and famines were also very common at that time, and about 30% of children died before reaching adulthood. So life was not easy for a Viking. Did you enjoy watching this video? Then click here to watch more interesting history videos from us.